The Penguins are set to take on one of the worst teams in the league tonight in the Ottawa Senators, and Pat and I are going to discuss how the Penguins can beat them right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on Twitter at SynonymousForWet. And you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. So it's another game night for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They'll head to Ottawa to take on the Ottawa Senators, one of the worst teams in the league. And for those that think this is going to be an easy game for the Penguins, well, think again. The Penguins have struggled against the Senators this season. They got blown out by the Senators at home during the early portion of the season. And then a bit later on in the season, right around the holidays, the Penguins played an abysmal 40 minutes up in Ottawa, played a great third period, were able to salvage a point, but gave the game away in overtime after a brutal turnover. They lose there in the extra session. So they'll try to avoid being swept by the Senators in this game. Even though the Senators are not good, Pat, they do still have quite a bit of talent. Brady Tkachuk, I still feel like, is their best player. 27 goals, 52 points in 61 games. He is an absolute rat, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. It is a compliment to Brady Tkachuk with how much of a rat he is, because I feel like the Penguins need a rat or two like him on their team. Tim Stützle has been great for the Senators this season as their second-line center. Drake Batherson has been very good. They have Matthew Joseph getting top 6 minutes. We all know how Claude Giroux has played against the Penguins over the years, dating back to his time with Philadelphia. But the one edge where the Penguins really have over the Senators is goaltending. Joonas Korpisalo is going to be starting for the Senators in this game. In 41 games, he's 13-20-4, 887 save percentage, 3.39 goals against average. I know the Penguins goaltenders have struggled a little bit over the past few weeks. They've been giving up goals in bunches at times, but they are still better than Joonas Korpisalo. He got way too much money, way too much term over the offseason. He was someone that I actually wanted the Penguins to go after, but when I saw that contract, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of glad that they signed Tristan Jarry with how he's played for most of the season. But that's where the Penguins really have an edge in this one. But overall, I'm really looking for a full 60-minute effort in this game with the way that they have played over the last 3 games.
Yeah, listen, the mourning period of losing Jake Guentzel is officially over. I can give them a little bit of a pass for the last 3 games, just simply because all the reporting we've seen, the word started to trickle out around the organization about 30 minutes before the Capitals game, and we know how important Jake Guentzel was to this franchise and to this team. So you lose someone like that, even though you know it's coming, it's still an absolute gut punch. And then they have to turn around and play 2 of the best teams in hockey back to back on a weekend. So at this point, the mourning period for losing Jake is done. And you're playing a team that is extremely beatable in the Ottawa Senators. They're in the basement of the league. They are just a directionless ship right now at this point. They can't decide what kind of team they want to be. They can't decide if they want to be a finesse team, if they want to be a hard-nosed team in the make and model of Tkachuk. They can't decide if they want to be a defense first team, and it leads to the team that you're seeing right now. The one thing the Penguins do kind of have working against them tonight overall, though, is that the Ottawa Senators actually aren't too bad on home ice. They are a pretty solid, considering relatively who they are and what their record is this season. They're 17-14-2 on home ice, so they do play pretty well in Ottawa. And like you said, a lot of good top-end talent on this team overall. It's, for as bad as they are, you look at Tim Stützle, he is turning out to be one of the better young players in the NHL. Claude Giroux is having a solid renaissance season for him as a veteran leader for the Ottawa Senators with 18 goals and 53 points. And then obviously you've got guys like Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, and Jacob Chychrun in their lineup. So there is talent there. And like you said, it has to be a full 60-minute effort because this is a team that's playing for the future. There are a lot of young pieces on this Ottawa Senators team outside of a guy like Claude Giroux. So they have a fairly bright future, and it appears like they actually finally have some competent ownership, some competent management, and they're going to start turning this ship around and making this a competitive club again. So, this team has a future to play for. And if you're the Penguins, all right, Jake is gone. We have mourned the loss. It's time to start battling and showing guys like Kyle Dubas and Mike Sullivan, if he remains coach, that I belong on this team into next season.
Yeah, and to go off that, I just want to see that fight and just see some resilience from this Penguins team as well. You've gotten your butts whooped 3 games in a row, outscored 15-1. That one goal that you scored was a pure lucky goal that Linus Ullmark didn't even see. I want to see some fight from this team in this game. You're going up against one of the worst teams in the league. Go out there and beat that team down to a pulp. That's what I really want to see in this game. And the Penguins, it looks like they might be getting some good injury news for this game. Drew O'Connor has been labeled a game-time decision. He was participating fully in the morning skate this morning, skating on Evgeny Malkin's line along with Riley Smith. Other lines for the Penguins, Michael Bunting with Sidney Crosby and Brian Rust, Rickard Rakell, Lars Eller, and Valtteri Puustinen, and then Benstrom with Noah Chari and Jeff Carter round out the forward group. And then defensively, Pettersson, Letang, Graves, Carlson, and then Joseph and Ludwig are kind of rotating a little bit at this point. I still don't like Ryan Graves with Erik Karlsson, but I feel like that's going to have to be a problem that they solve during the offseason, Pat, when they maybe try and get another top 4 defenseman for this team, just because I don't see Ryan Graves as that guy. But I've said that so many times on the show. But it is good news. It looks like right now that Drew O'Connor is going to be coming back, because they have definitely missed him these last several games and the depth scoring that he has provided for this team. I thought he was really coming back to himself before he got hurt. So his return, even though the Penguins are basically out of it right now, it's still a welcome sight for the Penguins.
Yeah, it is. And, DOC's stats this season aren't, going to jump off the page at you. He's only got 9 goals, 21 points, but he's been a very solid energy player. You know what you're going to get out of him every night. He is going to work his behind off. He's going to play physical. He's going to try to provide a spark for the team. And that's all he needs to do. It's what I've been saying for the past couple weeks, especially now with the acquisition of a guy like Michael Bunting. They need a couple more guys who play with sandpaper. It doesn't mean that they need goons. It doesn't mean that they need knuckle draggers who can't really do anything other than fight and hit. But you need guys who are going to go out there and they're going to throw a hit. They're going to play a high tempo, high energy, aggressive game. And that's what Drew O'Connor has provided for the Penguins pretty much the entire time he's been with them. And he's shown an ability to keep up in the top 6, which is, again, a good sign for the future. So I'm excited to have him back. I think he can be a big factor in this team, at least finishing the season, maybe not strong, but at least not going out with a whimper.
Yeah, he's proven himself as a bona fide NHL player this season. I know there were some questions from some people heading into the season about whether this guy had enough of the tools to be an NHL player, but he has more than answered those questions, I think, for this season. And heading into next season, I see him at least as a third-line player on this team. You could give him some top 6 time if needed. I wouldn't have him in the top 6 for next season, in my opinion, but I would still have him stable to the third line heading into opening night in October. But unless you have anything else to say about this Penguins Senators game, I'll hand it over to you before we head to break. But
I mean, the last thing I was going to say about Drew O'Connor is you look at him as almost like a Brian Rust light, to where he's going to be ideally a middle 6 forward, mostly plays on the third line, can kill penalties, but in a pinch with injuries or guys struggling, you can pop him up to the second line and he's not going to be out of place. And I really think, like, as the Penguins try to transition into this retooling, you need to get more guys like that. You need to get more Swiss Army knife players who can be up and down your lineup. I know that everybody wants them to get younger. I agree. I think they need to go get some more talent, obviously in the top 6 and in the top 4D. But if you can get these guys who, when your team is healthy, can go up and down the lineup, that's going to help you get back to the playoffs. Because you look at a lot of the teams that are in contention right now, yeah, they have locked in top sixes, but then you look at their bottom sixes and you go, okay, if somebody up top gets hurt, I'm not going to be out to lunch if this guy comes up to my second line or my first line.
Yeah, they have those teams have the depth that the Penguins don't have. The Penguins had the depth, especially 2016, 2017. You can even say 2018. Maybe not so much 2019. The Islander series, I feel like they weren't as deep there. But 2020, even 2021 and 2022, I felt like those two Penguins teams were also fairly deep. But these last 2 years, especially, that has not been the case. And the Penguins need to get back to that if they have any shot of trying to contend for a playoff spot next season. One more thing before we head to break, though. Tristan Jarry confirmed as the starter in this game, was the first goalie off, so he is going to be the starter for this game against the Senators. But that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, is it time to let some more of the kids play down the stretch, aka someone like Sam Poulin down in Wilkes-Barre? Well, Pat and I are going to discuss that, but before we get to that, we got to tell you all about Sleeper. Regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. You can do this by yourself. You can do this with your friends, your family. Heck, you can even do this with your girlfriend and whatnot. And all you have to do is pick whether studs like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Nikita Kucherov will record more or less their stats. Goals, assists, you can throw plus minus in there. You can do goaltenders in there with saves. And to win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Penguins fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, there's only 19 games left in the Penguin season. Obviously, they're not going to be making the playoffs at this point, even though they're mathematically alive, in quotation marks. But with the season basically over, I think it would be prudent for this team to at least call up a player or two from Wilkes-Barre to see what they can do for the final month to 5 weeks of the season. And one of those players is St. Poulin. I know he was a bit banged up for a bit of the season, but since coming back, 7 points in his last 5 games and is playing like one of the best players down in Wilkes-Barre. I know that team is not littered with so much talent, but Poulin, I feel like, is the best of those guys down there right now. And with only 19 games left, why not see what he can do and give him a shot for the rest of the season? And then also, if he plays well, maybe he could be on the opening night roster next year if he's able to succeed with this opportunity.
It's time. Not just because this season is cooked. It's time for Sam Poulin to prove he's an NHL player, or you have to figure out what you do with him moving forward. But he has been a solid contributor in Wilkes-Barre. I mean, like we said, 7 points in his last 5 games, but on the whole, he's played 30 games for Wilkes-Barre this year, and he's got 12 goals and 12 assists for 24 points in those 30 games. So he's looking like a capable contributor. And the thing I always tell people is don't get too caught up in top line stats when it comes to the American Hockey League. Because in the AHL, because there's so much player movement, because they are sandwiched in between the NHL and the ECHL, so there are guys up and down pretty much every single day at this point. So if you see a guy who's at a point per game, that guy should not be in the AHL. He should be in the NHL. But then when you look at a guy like Sam Poulin, who puts up 24 points in 30 games, that shows he is playing very well because it's a game with less structure. It's a game that it's a league where there's, like I said, less structure. You have to play fairly frequently, 3 games in 3 days. There are a lot of Friday, Saturday, Sunday schedules. Like, they don't play very much during the week. They play a lot of weekend games. So you get a lot of a condensed schedule. So Poulin being able to put up 24 points in 30 games and 7 in his last 5 shows that he is doing fairly well in that environment. So now it's time to bring him up to the NHL, give him an extended look, and see what he can do in the National Hockey League. Because with where this season is right now, it's full evaluation time for Kyle Dubas and company. It's everybody is singing for their supper at this point that's not named Crosby, Malkin, Letang, or Carlson. Everybody else, it's time for you to earn your keep.
And it's kind of what the Washington Capitals are doing right now, too. Even though they're kind of in the race as well, or more in the race than the Penguins are, they still are playing quite a few kids in the lineup to see who could be on that team for next season. Yeah, they have the big guns at least a little bit still on that team, but they're playing a whole bunch of kids from Hershey to see who could stick heading into next season. Now, I'm not saying the Penguins need to do that because I don't think they have that many kids from Wilkes-Barre to play, but they still have at least a couple of options to call up to play for the rest of the season. The other one is a player, Pat, that they just acquired, Vasily Ponomarev. He was playing for the Chicago Wolves this year in 39 games, 8 goals, 29 points in 39 games. Heck, even last year, 64 games, 24 goals, 46 points in 2 NHL games this year, had 2 points in those games, including his first NHL goal. So why not see what he can do for the rest of the season as well? Because I think for next year, he's definitely going to be in consideration to make the team out of training camp. I think he's going to be a player that we really discuss during that time as someone who can make the leap to the NHL full time for next season. So why not see what he can do, at least in maybe a 5, 6, 7 game sample during these last 19 games. You don't even have to play him all 19 games, but see what he can do in a small sample size heading into the offseason, then heading into training camp.
The kid projects as a bottom 6 center, which is something the Penguins have so sorely lacked in recent years. They need somebody who can be a solid, consistent 3rd or 4th line center. Like, we talked about it a lot this season that Lars Eller on a contender is a 4th line center, but you look at this kid and you see his stats and they are very solid. I mean, right now, so far this year, 8 goals, 21 assists, 29 points in 41 total games in the American Hockey League. Like you said, he came up and played a couple games with the Hurricanes and put up 2 points in 2 games. Granted, they came in the same game, but at the same time, this kid has, albeit a small one, but a little bit of a sample size that he can hang at this level. He can hang already at the National Hockey League. Now, maybe he's still young enough to where he might wear down after an extended look in the National Hockey League just because he's not quite ready for that. We see that plenty of times where first season or 2 after you make the jump to the NHL, you start to fade in the back half of the season just because your body's not used to playing a full 82 or close to a full 82. And then you also factor in that, you might play 30, 40 games at the NHL level, and then you might play 40 or 50 in the American Hockey League, and that takes its toll. So, but again, 19 games left, you really have nothing left to play for. So at this point, bring him up, let him see what he can do.
Agreed. Those would be the 2 players that I would really want to see in at least a short game sample during the final 19 games, however many games you want to play them for. But is there anyone else from Wilkes-Barre that you would want to give a shot for the final month to 5 weeks of the season?
I mean, the only other one I can think of, and it's not even so much a kid to play, it's more just to find out what you have once and for all, and that's Big Z. Just because, I mean, I think at this point we know who he is. It's kind of baked in, but at this point, maybe you treat it as like a next year audition of, hey, let's see if we got anything in you. His stats aren't great in the American Hockey League, which is disappointing because he, for a while, did look like he'd become a productive bottom 6 player and depth player for the Penguins, or if not the Penguins, just in the NHL in general. But I mean, 4 points in his last 5, 1 goal, 3 assists. But I mean, at this point, if you bring him up, it's more or less just to find out if you've got anything left with Zahorna at this point, whether he's worth holding on to or getting rid of. So I think if nothing else, you can call him up just to see what you've got.
Right. And I mean, it's probably more likely than not that he's not going to show you too much in that final sample just because, he had a few games earlier in the season where he looked like he belonged and then he just kind of tailed off. And that's not the first time that this has happened for this player. So yeah, you could maybe call him up as a courtesy call up, but I don't really think it's going to matter too much. But I think that'll do it for this second segment. Coming up to end the show, Pat and I are going to look at some possible offseason moves for the Penguins and what the Penguins could definitely do to try and get this team back into, I wouldn't say contending for the Stanley Cup, but at least trying to contend for a playoff spot for next season. But before we discuss that, we got to tell you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, yes, we are already looking ahead to the offseason, at least a little bit, even though the Penguins have 19 games left in this season. And we're looking at potential moves that they could make, because I feel you're going to see quite a few changes. We've been getting some comments about how, if they're just going to tinker around the edges, that's not going to change much. No, people, I don't think they're just going to tinker around the edges this offseason. I think they're going to make quite a few moves outside of keeping the core intact of Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, and I would probably throw Erik Karlsson into that mix. I know we've been getting a lot of comments about trading Erik Karlsson, and there's all this speculation with Ottawa. I don't foresee that happening right now. That can always change, but I foresee him being a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins for the 2024-2025 season. And as Kyle Dubas hinted at during his trade deadline press conference, they're going to have at least $12 million of cap space to work with heading in July 1. And that number could go up if they're able to move out a couple more contracts, maybe around the draft, someone like a Riley Smith. If you want to move on from someone like Lars Eller, that could work as well. But in terms of just free agency and cap space, they'll have around $12 million, which is close to what they had last year. They had about $20 million for last year, but it's still a little bit less, but it's more than what they normally have heading into July 1. So with that said, Pat, I feel you're going to see quite a few moves made. I would definitely look into trading Riley Smith around the draft, Lars Eller potentially as well. I mean, if you can also think about getting a hockey trade for Rickard Rakell, I think that would make sense. I don't think they're going to trade Brian Rust this summer, but it's something that I would maybe look at. But I also kind of I'm hesitant about it just because of the way he's played for them this season. And then you lose another top six winger. That's hard to replace. But the stage is set for there to be quite a bit of action for this team. And outside of player movement, I think you're going to see quite a few changes to the coaching staff. I would kind of be surprised at this point if any of the coaches are brought back.
Right. And obviously hope is not a strategy, but like you said, there is a very real world where the Penguins are going to be one of the biggest players in the lead up to free agency at the draft, because one, you have $12 million in cap space, thanks due in part to a rising salary cap that's going up just a shade under $5 million next season. And we know with the NHL, $5 million is a pretty good asset. Like usually if you're spending $5 million on a player, you're getting a pretty good player, usually. The other thing on that is, if you listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast, like Hunter and I do, Friedman hinted that the Penguins tried to move guys like Eller and Smith, and it wasn't for a lack of interest. Nobody had room. Nobody had cap space to take these guys on.
He mentioned the Kings specifically. They were interested in Riley Smith, but I mean, they have absolutely no space right now, which is why I think you might see more deals right around the draft, because the cap's going up. We're basically out of the flat cap era at this point. After the season, we'll be out of it. So with the cap going up, more teams will be able to take on more salary and thus help the Penguins out, and maybe have them do some hockey trades and bring in some younger pieces to help out the core.
Yeah, and then this summer, between the cap going up, a bunch of teams are going to want to make moves because they have extended cap space. They can go after guys that they may have wanted at the deadline but couldn't get, who do have at least a year left on their deal. So that puts in guys like Eller and Smith. And then you also think about the fact that the Penguins could find themselves in a very advantageous situation going up to the draft, depending on how the Stanley Cup playoffs play out. And you hinted at this yesterday. Should Carolina, and if you're a Penguins fan at this point, root for Carolina to make the final. Root for Carolina to make the final. Root for the Penguins to finish in the bottom 10 and get a good draft pick in the top 10 and take it back from San Jose this year. Because then you have 2 first-round picks, and one of which, if Carolina makes the final, it's 31 or 32. And you can dangle that out pretty easily for somebody at the draft to take on in another trade. So I think along with that, I mean, Raquel would be a good piece to move if you can find someone to take them. And again, with a rising cap, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they could move Ryan Graves, just because the term is terrible, the amount of years, but I could see them talking a team into like, listen, it's just not a fit in Pittsburgh. He's got a track record of playing well with the New Jersey Devils. He was a solid piece on their blue line for a good amount of years, and he just needs a change of scenery. And if you can pull that off, all of a sudden you're looking at $20 or more million in cap space to play with, and you could probably go out and swing some deals to get some better assets to retool this team in the summer.
I wouldn't say he played well with the Devils. I thought he was okay, but he wasn't bad like this.
Right. And I think with a 1-year sample size, it wouldn't be the hardest sell on other general managers of just like, listen, it didn't work here. He just doesn't fit. But if he goes to your system, he could fit. And with a cap going up, again, the term is bad, but the cap's going to continue to rise, and that cap hit is only going to fall.
Yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth there a little bit. Like, oh, yeah, this was the worst season of his career. He's probably not going to play like this again. How about you take him off our hands a little bit, even though we could maybe, I don't know, retain a little bit of money, but in a perfect world, you get out of that whole contract overall. But I mean, that would be that would be a kind of a dream scenario for the Penguins if they're able to get out of that contract, in my opinion. And one thing that Kyle Dubas did say during his press conference that I liked is that in the trades that he made, he even said that, we got assets back that we can potentially move to make other deals at the draft and into July. He said during the summer last year, they didn't have enough assets to maybe make some of the moves that they wanted to. So now that they do, and if we're able to get other assets around the draft, maybe say, again, moving out Riley Smith, who only have a year left on his contract, or moving out a couple other players, you'll have even more assets to go out and make moves to try and get younger players. That is one thing that I did like that Dubas said during his presser that I don't think we've discussed that much. But again, I really did appreciate that comment.
Oh, I agree. And I want to make this obvious before, I get Twitter and the comment section coming at me. I think a Ryan Graves trade is highly, highly unlikely.
Same here.
But I'm just playing out a way in which you could try to move him, is to do the change of scenery argument, say that he hasn't been great in Pittsburgh and it might work for you. I am extremely doubtful that a general manager would go for it. But as I like to say often on this show, the answer is always no until you ask.
Silly season has arrived early for us at this point, earlier than normal to say the least. But yeah, this is going to be quite an eventful offseason, I think, for the Penguins. I think you're going to see more movement than you've seen from this team in quite a while, in my opinion. But I think that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. We'll have a deep dive of players they could target via trade or free agency after the season ends, maybe sometime late April, early May, or even, June. We'll have like a full free agent preview for the show, but that's still a ways away at this point. But again, that will do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back on Wednesday to recap this game against the Senators and get you all set for Thursday night's game against the San Jose Sharks and cover any other Penguins news as well. So with that said, again, thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll talk with you all on Wednesday.